Okay, welcome to our weekly Parsha. This is the culmination of the book of Genesis, even though next week is the last portion of the book. There's 12 Parshas altogether, or portions. This is the confrontation, and this is the confrontation of Judah and uh, and Joseph. And let me just do a quick review that uh, Jacob has 12 sons. It's prophetic. We know he's going to have 12 sons. He knows he's going to have 12 sons. There's going to be 12 tribes. The Rachel and Leah knew there was going to be 12 tribes. And they're all competing to see how, could they get, how much of those 12 tribes they could get, just like you compete with yourself, how much life and fulfillment you can get. And that's what they were doing. They had these tribes, and the 11th child born, but the first child to Rachel was the child Joseph. And when Joseph was born, and not until he was born, Jacob, who was on the run from Esau, felt that he could finally confront Esau. With the birth of Joseph, somehow something in Joseph allowed him to feel that he could go and take on his rival brother who wanted to kill him. So but as Joseph grows up, the brothers distrust him and feel that maybe he's like an Esau or an Ishmael, born into the family from the father, but maybe an illegitimate member of the Jewish people, just like Esau was, just like Ishmael. Ishmael's brother was Isaac. Esau's brother was Jacob. And basically say Christianity came from Esau, and the Islam came out of Ishmael. So those are the big religions that we're competing with on earth, and so the brothers try to kill Joseph, but because Joseph prophesizes that the brothers will and the father will all bow to him, and also the mothers, but the mothers couldn't bow to him because they were already dead. Rachel and Leah were already dead. But be that as it may, so they sell him down to Egypt, and miraculously he becomes the viceroy of Egypt, the second in command, and there's a famine, and his brothers are forced to come down to Egypt for food, and he recognizes his brothers. They don't recognize him. It's been 12 years. He's got a beard now. They can't see past that beard, but he knows who they are. But they don't bring Benjamin with them, and he wants to see Benjamin, and he needs all the brothers to bow to him, even the father, who will bow next week's Parsha. He will bow as his father will actually bow to him in next week's Parsha to fulfill the prophecy. And therefore, he makes a ruse up that they're spies and says, prove to me that prove to me that you're not spies. Bring your brother Benjamin to me, which they do. And then he's going to do the ultimate test with them. His test with them is, you guys took me and threw me down into Egypt and sold me into slavery, and you didn't fight for me. I want to see that we can reconcile. I want to see that we can reconcile historically the Jewish people forever, because that's a very bad omen that you sold me into slavery. That means the Jewish people, the 12 tribes, aren't whole. We're fighting. So he says, okay, he plants a wine cup on Benjamin and says, someone stole my wine cup. And then they find the wine cup on Benjamin, and I'm really cutting down the story here. And he says, Benjamin is going to be my slave forever. The rest of you go up to your father in peace. Well, they all know that if they come out without Benjamin, and this father, Jacob, already thinks Joseph is dead. He hasn't seen Joseph for 22 years. If he doesn't see Benjamin, he's going to flip out, because Benjamin and Joseph were the two sons of Rachel, his primary wife, the woman he loved more than anything else in the world. Yes, he did love Leah, but the woman he loved more than anything else in the world, nothing remains, and his whole life he thinks is a waste. Jacob will think his whole life is a waste. They got to get back Benjamin. So Judah, that's what we're named after. We're Jews. We're named after Judah, which means thank you. That's what the name really means. It means thank you. That's what Jews do. We thank God. Separates us out from the rest of the world. So Judah steps forward and says, hold on, man. You take me instead of him. I'll be your slave for life, but this boy goes back to his father. And Judah goes further and says, you're gonna kill our old father if he doesn't get to see his son Benjamin. How can you do this to our father? He has, and his other son is gone, and therefore, and he paints a whole picture without going. I'm not going to go through the whole dialogue, but he paints a picture of how can you be so cruel to our father to take away the son, his last son, from the only surviving son of this woman. And so then Joseph says, okay, at that point he has everybody clear out of the court. Everybody clears out, and he says to his brothers, all the Egyptians have to leave, and he says to his brothers, I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive? So, they just told him his father was alive. He revealed himself as Joseph, and then he says, is my father still alive? Meaning, what did you guys do to my father? Why did you guys sell me down into slavery and rip me out of away from my father and do this to my father? And the brothers were totally blown away. They thought Joseph was dead, and yet he was in front of them the whole time. Joseph had his oldest son, Manasseh, was the translator back and forth between Egyptian and Hebrew. Joseph understood the Hebrew, but he was just faking it. And now the brothers realize the whole time Joseph was playing us to try to reconcile the family. And the brothers didn't know what to say. They wanted to say something. They couldn't. He had him checkmated. And that is our lives. Our lives is we're pounding away at God saying, I don't get what's going on in my life. I feel this is hypocritical. I feel I'm getting ripped off. I feel this isn't fair. I'm frustrated. And at the end of our lives, God is going to say, he's going to reveal our lives in front of us. And we're going to say, oh my gosh, this whole time the answers were always right in front of me. I just never saw them. I was so in my own head the whole time that I didn't realize that. And that is going to be that. So this scene in the Torah is alluding to that. And the brothers really never quite fixed over that schism between the outlook of Joseph, which is like integrating Torah and life completely together, and the outlook of Judah, which is Torah is primary, all the rest is secondary. There are two ways to look, and neither of them are wrong. One is you integrate Torah into everything. Another thing is Torah, there's a supremacy about Torah, and the Jewish people, as you see, we have that conflict between us. We like to watch football, but we like to study Torah. And you can make examples out of sports and teach Torah with them. Yes, you can. I do it all the time. But there's another school of thought, which is, NFL football, never should watch it. You should only be doing Torah. It's two different worlds, but they do connect. And it's just the Jews. The trouble is when we go the Joseph route, we can get sucked into society and our Judaism can disappear, which is what's going to happen to the Jews. They're going to get too sucked into Egypt at the end of this parsha. The Jews they're acquiring the land, but the verb is the land acquired them. The Jews are going to be acquired by the Egyptian culture. They won't completely give in to the Egyptian culture, but this is the beginning of their assimilation into the Egyptian culture. They won't lose their language. They won't lose their clothes, but they will begin to lose their they're going to start losing things about what makes them uniquely Jewish. They're going to hold on though to their Jewish language and they will dress differently, and then of course they didn't eat the Egyptian diet. They had even though they didn't have Torah yet, they had somewhat of a kosher diet. They had a kosher diet. Now, so the Jews go down to Egypt, and Egypt goes through 2 years of terrible famine. Joseph moves people from he uproots entire cities, and he moves he takes Dallas and he sticks it over in Miami. He takes Miami, sticks it over in New York. Takes New York, puts it into Chicago. He moves cities by cities. He's moving the people around. Why? Because he doesn't want people to claim that the Jews don't belong where they are. The Jews are living in a place called Goshen. It's their own little ghetto. He wants to move everyone around so they don't claim that the Jews are foreigners to the culture, because he made everybody foreigners. He moved everybody around. He exiled cities and whole. He also does another thing. If you want to get food, because it's a famine, the whole world is coming to Egypt. Egypt had 7 years of good growth and abundant growth, and they stored it, and now they're selling it to the rest of the world. The second thing is, if you want to get grain, you have to do circumcision. How about that? How many people would do that? We still got guys on the phone call? Raise your hand.
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the idea is do you imagine that? Do you imagine guys going down to welfare here, getting a welfare check and saying, okay, you can get your welfare check, but you got to get circumcised? Woo! Well, anyways, that's what Joseph made everybody do because he didn't want the Jews to stick out. So if you can mute that phone in the back. Okay, so
Sorry.
that's that. So he prepared. But Jacob knew the Jews were going to be enslaved. He knew the Egyptian culture was eventually going, and I'll talk about it in next week's Parsha, what Jacob does on his deathbed to save the Jewish people, to orientate us properly so that we can get to this point, the year 2018 or 5779, that we can get to this point. What did Jacob do on his deathbed? Because he knew, and this is next week's Parsha, the Jews are going to lose it. So what could he do as a dying man to make sure, to ensure that there always would be a Jewish people? That's a very good question, something that we have to think about with our own children. But that's next week's Parsha. So the brothers go. The brothers find out it's Joseph, and I'll just talk about one or two more scenes quickly. They tell Jacob. They go up to back to the land of Canaan, Israel. They tell Jacob, your son Joseph is alive. Not only that, he's the ruler of Egypt. He's the viceroy of Egypt, the viceroyal, only second to Pharaoh. Joseph and Jacob's heart skips a beat. He has like an aneurysm. He can't believe it, and he says, "I have to go see him before I die." At this point, Jacob's 130 years old, very old looking, because he took all the worry about Joseph and his daughter Dinah, who got raped, and he hits all in his face, and looks like a very old man, even though he walks with God and he's a prophet. So he goes to see. He rides out to see Joseph, and they meet after 22 years. The old father, grandfather, great-grandfather, prophet, man of God, patriarch of the Jewish people, meeting the young son. At this point, Joseph is about 39 years old, meeting the young son who's ruling the greatest country, the greatest empire of that time. They meet after 22 years. You can imagine what Spielberg would do with that scene. What does Jacob do? He says the Shema. He says the Shema because as much as he loves his son, he wanted to use that moment to fuse to God his love. And so he says Shema while Joseph cries on his shoulder. And that's something we can all do. If you have an unbelievable moment in your life and you're just bursting out of your skin with incredible intensity of emotion, say the Shema, link it into your love of God. It really makes a difference in your life. And the last scene I'm going to talk about the minute to go is that Jacob then meets Paro, the prophet, the king of the spiritual world meets the king of the secular physical world. And Paro looks at him and says, "How old are you? Man, I've never seen anybody this old in my life." And Jacob says, "I've had a really rough life." For that, he's punished. And God takes years off his life. Jacob was supposed to live about to 180, and he only lives to 147, because God says you do not you don't disgrace God's name by saying, "Hey, I'm a Jew and I lived a hard life." We say, "I'm a Jew. I lived a challenging life. I had a lot of opportunities," but we don't say life is rough and tough. Not when you're a man of God. You just say, "I had my challenges, but I've overcome them." So because of that, on his level, he should have not, responded to Paro that way. He represents Torah. It's a deep subject. We could talk about it. But okay, so I look forward to next week where we're going. In fact, I even wrote an article about it in the Jewish Journal. It will come out next week. What you can say to your family to keep them Jewish for the next 3,000 years. All right, everybody. Good Shabbos. Thanks for coming. Whoever came last night to the class, and
Good Shabbos.
We will see. Hopefully, we'll talk next week. Good Shabbos.
Thank you. Good Shabbos.
Pleasure. Good Shabbos.